Very glitch. Okay, I think we are recording now. Hi to all the folks at home who can't be with us. We are doing the week 5 Zoom for Contract A, and this week's Zoom, very interesting, all on consideration. So we've done most of the legwork for the Holy Trilogy, which is offer and what, folks?
Acceptance.
That's it. And now?
Consideration.
That's it. And you know what? If you thought last week and this week, don't worry, by the way, if you haven't managed to grapple with this week's reading just yet. I know that some people, there's been quite a few people that have encountered various glitches during the midterm break with all sorts of merry mayhem making its way into our lives. So don't worry too much about that. But for those that have managed to have a look at this week's readings, actually, can I just have a quick 1 for yes if you've looked at the readings and 2 for not yet? Okay, so we have a reasonable spread. For those who have, congratulations. There is a lot to think about for consideration, is there not? You know, I vividly remember my first year. I know Tammy's saying a lot of cases. I vividly remember my first year, mind blown, when I got to the week's worth of work on consideration. And the thing is, you know, it doesn't read like a novel. You know, it's not that convenient. It reads like this twisty, turny mystery that has all these exceptions and exceptions to the exceptions. And then you've got all these disparate, you know, principles that seem to get thrown at you, and I don't know what you did at the end of the chapter, but when I was in first year, I just closed it and went, oh, I have a headache. And that's why I'm hoping that, I know, exceptions everywhere. That's why I'm hoping that if you looked at my videos, I put a fair bit of time into those in trying to organise things into some cohesive thread so that you could get your head around things a little more easily. Did you, of those who have had a look at things, did you manage to look at the videos at all? Can I have a 1 for yes and a 2 for no? Oh, yeah, so a few. Oh, good. So I'm hoping that, oh, thanks, yeah. Look, I was hoping that if you did do your materials for this week, and if you're watching this and you haven't yet done your materials, I would really recommend watching the videos first and then doing the text reading, because, you know, Wilmot's okay as far as texts go, but I still think that there is a lot of haphazardness, you know, in the way that they just bring in all these different principles in that chapter, and then, you know, at the end of it, your brain's going, oh my gosh. So hopefully, if you tackle the videos first, then do your readings, you'll have some idea of where the bird's eye picture is, and then you can go through the text and kind of slot it into the areas that you already have kind of flagged in your mind, to organise things rather than just being, you know, confronted with all of this stuff. So that's the way I would recommend unpacking the consideration stuff. So apart from that, I think what we might do this evening, I know normally we do get a chance to do a cook's tour of the week's readings kind of before we jump into the tutorial, but tonight's tutorial is kind of nice in that it does actually bring up most of the salient parts of the text anyway. So I think if we just kind of jump into problem A and problem B. I know problem B wasn't actually a problem. I've already had someone give me a bollocking about that. Yes, I'm aware it was an essay. But if we jump into those, I think and I hope at the end we should feel a little bit more comfortable with all of the various stuff that gets stuffed into the heading of consideration. So what I might do is just start sharing, and all right, here we go. Now, the problemo, I've got it up here. Hang on a second. Problem A was the little mini baby problem facts. So Dale was a lovely fellow, known to be honest, generous, but utterly unreliable. Heidi, his friend, just purchased some new bedroom furniture and Dale offers to save her the delivery fee by collecting it for her. Heidi's concerned that Dale may forget to collect the furniture, so she decides to put him under as much obligation as possible. Sorry, I love that. That appeals to my odd sense of humour. She has already agreed to babysit his children the following night for just $20, so that's a good start. While visiting him, she does his ironing without being asked, and in conversation she reminds him about the recent help she gave him organising a party. So we need to think about this week's materials and then ask ourselves, has Heidi given any consideration for Dale's promise? And if she wanted to be, really enforceable, what would you suggest she do? Now, thank you, folks, for posting up to Moodle. I note that there has been a bit of activity there, so that's lovely. Thank you. Keep it up. Generally speaking, I will engage, as you know, with what you've said on the Moodle forum after the tutorial. Otherwise, I'm kind of doing 2 tutorials. And I will also get your lovely IRACs back to you after the tutorial. Yes, people have still been sending in IRACs, which is lovely work. The more IRACs that you can send in and get a bit of voice feedback from me, because I'll send you a voice file, the better and more confident you will feel when it comes to handing in your written assignment. Now, as you all know, the written assignment's up and it is on offer and acceptance. We had a very detailed tutorial on offer and acceptance last time around, so I would suggest you go and check that out. It's not due until the 4th of January, Friday the 4th of January. Now, that seems like a very long time away, but I can guarantee you it will creep up on you really quickly because, shock, shock, horror, we have, where are we? 2. Oh my gosh. Exactly 2 weeks till Christmas Day, folks. Wow. Who knew? And if you're anything like me, time will get away from you. And this is why, that's all a very long-winded way of saying, practice your IRACs. Okay, so try, if you can, to get an IRAC into me, for some form of formative feedback this week, if you can, preferably before Thursday, because I don't want to just be doing them endlessly. And try and maybe do another one on the 18th, and then we are breaking for the 25th, and then the next following week on from that is the 1st, New Year's Day. So I ran that poll. I ran the poll. I've just noticed that some Contract B people have logged into the Contract B Zoom. I think they're obviously people in daylight saving. And so we've agreed to, instead of holding the tutorial on New Year's Day, we'll be holding it on the Wednesday the 2nd of January. And then it's only another 2 days until you've got to hand up your assignments. So that's why I say, lovely to see people doing IRACs. Keep practicing. And even if you don't hand them up to me, I would really recommend even just setting aside, say, 15 to 20 minutes of a week, if that's all you've got, to force yourself in exam conditions, if you can, to sit down and bash out an IRAC. Okay, super important. Why am I saying this? Because I have spent all of today drafting your exam, your end of term exam, and you're going to need IRAC practice. Okay, you're going to need to be able to bash that IRAC out, you know, as best you can, notwithstanding nerves, in the time that you've got. So this is a 3-hour exam, and you really want to be comfortable with your problem answering technique well before you go into that exam. As I say, the best way to get practice is formative, where there's no marks at stake, handing stuff in, or even just sitting down, practicing in the quiet of your own home, or in the library, wherever you practice, and bashing one out, so that by the time you actually get into, well, A, submitting your assessment, and B, sitting in the exam room, you're super confident. Maybe that's overstating things. You are happy with your technique, all right? So let's have a look. It said 30 to 45 minutes. I would expect maybe closer to an hour. I don't know. Did anybody actually try and... Yeah, there's a few people here that did do an IRAC, I know. How long roughly did it take you guys that bashed out the IRAC? Can you do it via mic? Because I can't see the chat. Oh, yes, I can. Here, chat's over here. Sorry, it's on my other screen. Someone says I'm muted.
AJ?
Yeah, about how long?
It took me about an hour, because this was the first one that I actually had the guts to submit. So it was still pretty rough, but I, you know, whatever, I just sent it through.
It's worth it though, isn't it? Because, you know, when you go through a tutorial, and I'm mindful that we're eating up a bit of time, but this is useful discussion. When you go through a tutorial, you know, at the end of the tutorial, you look back and you go, oh, yeah, that all seems to fit together quite well. I reckon I could have bashed that out. That's why I say I don't mind you handing in an IRAC after the concepts have kind of gotten gelled a bit after the tutorial. But where you're hitting an exam and you've not seen the scenario before and had a chance to think about it, it's a whole new world when you've got to actually sit down and bash it out in handwriting also. And see, for me, I was lucky I did most of my exams actually on computer, but you guys have to actually do the old school, you know, pen and paper, and that all takes, to me, a lot more time. So all the better too, Tammy Lee, like you have done. Even if you just bash it out and you whack it up onto Moodle for a bit of discussion, it's really worthwhile. And if, like I said, you know, if you want to submit it to me, then that offer is open also. Are people still having a problem with the sound? I've just had someone say to me they've got a problem with, just let me know. Oh, okay. All right, let me know if there is lingering issues with audio. Okay, so consideration. Let's just practice our IRAC skills. So let's do some what we call issue spotting. Now, of course, there's one big issue, and if you were going to state the issue in an IRAC, you're more than welcome to do something like that. Where's my highlighting gone? There we go. Okay. short and sweet, you know. You don't have to go and unpack it like, you know, has Heidi, okay, you wouldn't say something like, Heidi promised to babysit his children, did some ironing, and helped him organise a party. Is any of this valid consideration? You don't really need to go into facts in any real detail in your issue. Even the guys in contract B are having problems with this. Like, their assignment is actually due this Friday, and I've still got people saying to me, you know, why do you say not to go through facts in the issue? The sole reason for that is because you want to leave as much word count for your application section as possible. So I'm never going to be giving much in the way of marks, if any, for the issues section, because really that's just to be used as a flag for the marker to say, bird's eye view, is this person in the right area of law or not? That's pretty much all it's for. In terms of our assignment, well, we know that it's on offer and acceptance, so, you know, everybody knows that. So I'm not going to be weighting marks for something like that. Your rules section also is important in terms of giving yourself, you know, setting out in a nice logical way all of the authorities, the cases that you're going to be relying on in your application section. But it's really the application section where you discuss the facts of the cases and the facts of your problem. So if you start discussing the facts of your problem up in your issues section, you're going to be duplicating it. And same goes for your rules. If you start discussing your facts in your rules section, you're going to be duplicating what you say in your application section. Okay? So try and steer clear of discussion, any extended discussion of facts, either in your issues or your rules section. Okay? You will just rob yourself of marks, because in fact a couple of people, more than a couple of people in the IRACs I've seen, anyone who starts wandering into a discussion of facts either in the issues section or the rules section inevitably ends up with about a 1-paragraph application. And that's just going to cost you marks, because routinely I will weight that application section with most of your marks. It'll just be loaded up, because as I say in my IRAC tips, almost anybody can do an issues section. It's a no-brainer. Almost anybody can set out a bunch of rules. That doesn't require any real knowledge or analysis, okay? It's really the application section that tells the marker everything that you want to know about that student's level of knowledge, level of mastery, okay, of that area of law. So that's where all your marks are going to be picked up. So let's pick up, if you saw this little paragraph problem in an exam, what are the things that you would go and underline oh, I don't think you can mark the exam paper, can you? So what are the things that you would jot down on your rough paper? As things that jump out at you. Aha, Lauren's saying babysit his children. Okay. Agreed to babysit the children for $20. Yes. What's another issue that you need to discuss? The grand. Sorry, what was that?
Sorry, doing the ironing without being asked.
Yes. Does his ironing. She's a very friendly person, really, isn't she? All right, and the last thing?
The party.
Yes.
Talking about the party.
Yes. So you can see there's going to be 3 nice little subheadings in your IRAC, isn't there? Nice little subheadings. So the grand bird's eye view is, has Heidi given any consideration for Dale's promise? But we can see that there are different sub-issues here in terms of the various things that have occurred. So if we say here, issue, and then we can just pop this in here. All right, rules. Now, the things that we have highlighted will help us pick out the rules, won't they? So what are the three kinds of issues here that we can group those three problems under? Yes, yep, absolutely. So I'll put one here, agreed to babysit the children. In fact, I won't even do that. I will do just as Tammy Lee did, and I will go hit straight on the actual legal authority. So existing contractual duty is generally no consideration, no sufficient consideration. And the authority, as Tammy Lee said there, still, I think it was still YLK Myrick. Okay, and the next one, I can't do both on the screen there, unfortunately. The ironing without being asked. What's the issue there? Aha, yes, sorry, Tammy Lee, I didn't see what you typed. So consideration not bargained for. And authority.
Wrong one, sorry. Comb and comb?
Yes. Yep, and the last one. So we're talking about here now the recent help she gave him. Obviously, recent help. When did that, is that in the future or has already happened? Past. Thanks, Steph. Yes, it's already happened. So we're looking at the issue of, what's the old rule about something that's happened in the past?
Past consideration is no consideration.
That's it. And we are looking at the case of
Riscola and Thomas.
That's it. Exactly, exactly. And so they are the rules that we will be working with. Now, I don't care. I generally speaking like to see these as bullet points. I just find that, and this is just pure exam technique, if you put them down, oh goodness me, if you put them down as bullet points, it works really well, because what you can do when you do your application section, you can just cross off each of your little bullets as you've discussed it, so that you know, like I used to spend a fair bit of my perusal time just working out all of the rules and everything, having them all ready, so that when I got to actually start my writing, I could bash out the issue and the rules really quickly and put most of my thinking time into my application. So I would have pretty much everything ready to go, and then when the application time, when it came time to write my application, I would then address each one of the bullet points that I'd put down in my rules section and just cross it off. This, I think, is where I understand there are, there's a big debate about the whole IRAC process, but I think it's very useful in terms of particularly exam technique, because it tends to, when you're fighting everything in a first year exam, you're fighting the whole newness of the law and reading cases, working out what they mean, actually learning the law and the principles, you're working against all your nerves and exam nerves in particular. And there's a lot of fatigue by the time you hit exams because you've been going for the whole 12 weeks, then you've had swap back and your brain is so full. Some people, unfortunately, have 2 exams on the one day. So you're fighting a lot of different things, and this is where something like an IRAC format can help, because it kind of is just that little safety net. It's a good way to set things out to kind of keep you on the right track, if you know what I mean. So what we can do is pop a little subheading in here, existing contractual duty. Now, what would we be saying here? What would we be saying about, too bad, so sad. Amy Lee's making jokes. What would we be saying about existing contractual duty?
Will we just discuss the facts of Stilk and Myrick and then the facts of Heidi and Dale, and then just, I guess, compare or distinguish which, does that make sense?
Beautiful, beautiful. That is exactly how you would go about doing things. If you wish to state a general principle, you can do this. You might want to say something like, generally, where did that underlining come from? Consideration must be fresh. Consideration must be bargained for each new contract agreement. Yes, and existing and already existing, I know that's a bit of a tautology, but anyway, contractual duty will generally not be considered sufficient consideration for a new agreement. In Stilk, oh, Myrick, okay, hit me with it, facts. I think we briefly touched on it, but.
It's about the ship and the deserters, and that the ship had already agreed to have a return trip. That was what they were agreed to pay for, and then when the people deserted and the captain promised more or to split the wages and then didn't follow through, the court said this is already existing duty, like they'd already agreed to the trip regardless of
yes.
the 2 people leaving or not.
Yes, yes. Anyone got anything to add to that? Go on, Tammy Lee. You look like you're itching at the chat. Itching at the chat. What does that even mean?
I was trying to remember the case. There's another case about the ship where a lot of people deserted, and so it didn't end up being an existing contractual agreement because it wasn't safe, and the people crewmen, but I can't remember the case.
Yes.
But, yeah, I was just thinking it's sort of the same, but this one, it was still safe for them to continue on with the journey after only 2 people deserted, so it turned out the way it did.
Yes, exactly. Hartley and Ponsonby is the case you're thinking of. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, they're good little bookend cases, aren't they, really? It's handy where you get those. I call them bookend cases because one kind of goes one way and one kind of goes the other way, and you can kind of see the principle fleshed out a little bit better once you've got a grip on both. I think that the key thing to take away from the Stilk and Myrick case is that they had already agreed to do all they could under emergency. Here's something I prepared earlier. So they agreed to work the ship and do all he could under all emergencies of the voyage. couple of them ran off, which seems to be the way of the world in those days. And then he's offered them extra money to keep going. No consideration there, exactly for the reasons that we have been discussing. And on a policy view, why do you think this is a sensible, oh goodness, why do you think this is a sensible decision? On a policy view, what's the gist of, what is that going to do? I mean, if he'd offered them more money to do exactly what they've already agreed to do in the first place, and that was held to be valid / sufficient / good consideration, what would the problem be?
Well, you've effectively annulled the original contract. So it would open up a can of worms where there wouldn't be any certainty in any contracts.
Yes, actually, you know what? I hadn't thought about it in those terms. I love it when students do this. I think you're absolutely right. It would certainly undermine the whole basis of the bargain, because you'd never be sure about whether or not the person was going to turn around and try and reopen the bargain. That's absolutely true. I guess that kind of feeds into the point that I was going to make, which is it would basically just open the door for extortion. You know, you'd find yourself strapped into a contract with someone and they'd say, nah, sorry, not going to do anything until you give me more money. And if that kind of thing was considered to be, you know, sufficient reason to get the extra money, then there's a bit of a policy problem, isn't there? If that happens.
Williams and Rothby brothers.
I love it. I love this group of. That is awesome. That is awesome. And you've jumped about three. You've taken a little segue and kind of driven through the tube to the end. Yes, that's absolutely right. In Williams and Rothby, obviously, we have an existing contractual duty being held to be performance of an existing contractual duty to be sufficient consideration. What is the fancy footwork that the court used, though, to get around Stilk and Myrick? Because they didn't overrule Stilk and Myrick. And when was Stilk and Myrick decided? A long time ago. 1809. Williams and Rothby was 1970s, if I recall correctly. They didn't overrule it. So what was the basis on which they got around Stilk and Myrick?
The real benefit to both parties to let it proceed the way that they did it.
Yep, practical benefit.
Yeah.
Other magical words that you want to use. What was the practical benefit in Rothby?
So if the person continued to do if they offered him more money and he continued to actually do the job, then both people benefit, because he gets the money for finishing the job, but the other person doesn't have to then pay the developer didn't then have to pay someone else to come in and start from scratch and finish off what the other one had done. So it just basically made more sense for both of them to continue. So they both derived a benefit from it. So they let it proceed.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And also there was, I missed, your microphone cut out on my end just for a second at the beginning. Forgive me if I'm doubling up here, but the thing was that the head contractor, Rothby, would avoid paying a penalty under the head contract if he could assure himself that the subcontractor, Williams, would actually go ahead and complete on time. And that, plus being relieved of the burden of having to find a new subcontractor at short notice, they were the things that the court found as sufficient benefit flowing to Rothby from Williams actually agreeing to go ahead and perform the rest of the contract. Okay. So they did do a bit of a fancy footstep round it. There is an extended discussion in Wilmot about this and whether the whole rule in Stilk and Myrick is really still applicable, whether it makes good business sense to have that rule. I want to touch back on that issue at the end of the tube if we can. So here, Heidi has already agreed the babysitting arrangement and fee prior to Dale offering to collect furniture. And accordingly, this is an existing contractual duty. A court would likely hold following Stilk Myrick that this was not sufficient consideration to make the arrangement legally enforceable. Yeah, or some such thing. Or some such thing. Okay, so what have we done? We have said, well, look, guess what? There's this general principle here. This is the case that establishes the general principle. And this is, okay, having looked at the general principle, the case law, let's compare it to our facts. Well, you know what? Our facts are pretty much similar to that in Stilk and Myrick. You know what? You could also say, if you want to just be a bit sassy and show off to me, you could say, so note this, Tammy Lee. If you want to be sassy, you could say something like, there is nothing in the manner of Hartley v. Ponsonby where the sailor agreed to abandon the contract with the captain due to the emergency on the ship. And remember, that was like more than half the sailors deserting. That would suggest the previous contract, previous, yeah, it is a contract for babysitting between Dale and Heidi would be similarly abandoned, such that there was any fresh consideration later on to make the arrangement enforceable. So what you're saying is, I'm aware that there is this case of Stilk and Myrick. There is also another case of Hartley and Ponsonby. You've shown me that you know what the facts of Hartley and Ponsonby are. But there's nothing here that's like that would make this an exception to that rule. I guess is just this is all just stuff off the top of my head, but you can see my point, can't you? So this here would be like a great solid credit, you know, high credit kind of answer. If you add something like this that show me, well, you're kind of thinking outside the square, you're showing me that you know other case law, you might pick up a few extra marks. Do you know what I mean? You're just showing that extra level of mastery. You don't just know one case, you know that there is this body of case law here. Okay. Okay. Now, I guess that deals with the existing contractual duty. Oh, can I ask you a question? Why is this not past consideration? Because they already arranged the contract, sometime previously. So why is this not past consideration is no consideration? Anyone got? Oh, sorry, Damien's saving on penalty. Sorry, Damien, I didn't see your last comment.
Oh, yeah, that was from before. That's all right. I'll have a go at this one, though, because I wrote in my initial response today that I thought it was past consideration, but perhaps because that babysitting thing was a concluded, or was a I guess a completed contract, it doesn't apply as past consideration, maybe?
I'm going to push you on this one. Okay, is that contract completed? Because if we follow this through to its logical conclusion.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so offer and acceptance has been completed. So the contract hasn't been, because the babysitting hasn't been done. But, okay, so the offer and acceptance has been done, though.
Yes. What is left to happen?
The performance.
Yes. So and what was the performance? What was
babysitting the kid for $20 or something?
Yes.
Like handing over the money and doing the babysitting?
Yes, and that's the swap of the consideration. So can you see it's actually not past? The actual consideration hasn't flowed between the promisor and the promisee yet. So we've got the arrangement on foot, we've got the contract on foot. It's an existing contractual obligation, but it's not past consideration because the consideration hasn't happened yet. And that's why it's not past consideration. Okay, I thought in all likelihood, there would be loads of people out there wondering the same thing. So that is a very sensible gut reaction to something like that it's past because they concluded the contract, some time ago. So good to just pick up that little nuance. Now, ironing. So we have, I'll just nip it from here. I won't use ironing as the heading. I will use consideration not bargained for as the heading. Okay. All right. So, how do you want to start this off then? Divorcing couple, Mr. C agreed to pay Mrs. Tammy Lee's already onto it. Leave it on. Oh, sorry. I've missed something in the chat box here. Oh, is this the Christmas tree? I love the Christmas tree. Okay. All right. Maybe just put some sunglasses on is all I can suggest. All right. So Tammy Lee's already into the whole coom and coom scenario here. So how do we want to kick this off? Write the IRAC with me, folks, because, this is good practice. Let's do it. Shout it out. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll have a go. So it needs to be bargained for, and that basically means that the promisor needs to ask for it.
Yes.
So there hasn't been the Dale or whatever his name is didn't ask her to do the ironing, so that's what constitutes not bargaining for something.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Woo, woo. Okay, so Dale would have had to have asked for that ironing to be done in return for him collecting that furniture, for it to be all part of the bargain. One promise must be exchanged for another. That's exactly right, Tammy Lee. So then you'd be saying, in the case of coom and coom, then I'll just get something I prepared earlier here, which is essentially what Tammy Lee popped into the chat box. Mr. Coombe agreed to pay Mrs. Coombe £100 a year. She then didn't apply to the divorce court for maintenance. He reneged, she sued, she lost. Why was that? Because her conduct was not done at the express or implied request of the husband. Amateur move. Love it. Yes, too much trust and naivete, unfortunately, there. So that is the main problem here. Let's turn it around and apply it to our facts. This is where we get the application, okay? So we've said general rule, here's the case law. Obviously, you'd probably want to be, discussing the case law in much nicer detail than I have there, but you get the general drift. Okay, so here, how can we tease it out for me? Someone give me the words and I will type them. What's happened? Who haven't we heard from? Come on, peeps. Talk with me. Talk with me. I don't bite. Oh, Steph, you're looking like you're champing at the bit there.
Yeah, my brain is fried like everyone else's, I think. But I guess here we have, even though she's done the ironing and it's a good gesture, Dale is under no obligation. Like, he wasn't even aware of it happening, and therefore obviously no consideration has been bargained for, and so that can't even come into play when if it were to go through.
Yes. So what we'll do in terms of when you're pulling apart some case law and you are then applying it to your facts is to try and discuss your facts in line with what happened with the case law, so you can see where the similarities are and where the differences are. So what we could say is something like here, like Mr. Coombe, Dale agreed to collect the furniture. Heidi then did the ironing. This conduct was not done at the express or implied request of Dale. Accordingly, it appears a court would hold that this conduct was not bargained for and would not be considered valid consideration. You say it far more elegantly than that, but you get the general drift again. You know what I mean? Okay. Happy with that? Queries or questions? Haha.
I had just a random question about that case because it's such an old case. I was just wondering in law like this, when it's so old, what if he may not have specifically asked or requested her to go to the divorce court, but the act of him paying money kind of implied she shouldn't go because that would have been embarrassing, and that was the whole reason he was paying money, and because of the time at the day. Like, so my question is, the way women were treated and understood in marriage way back in some of this case law, would that change today? Is, I guess, my question. Because I read this case and I was like, man, that seems unfair.
Unfortunately, okay, so there are a couple of different things I would need to say to that. yes, the view of women has tended to change since 1951. However, in matters of divorce, you are thrown into the realms of family law. And I don't know, for anybody else that has been through the bowels of family law, like I have, it really can seem a bit like, Alice and the Looking Glass. What happened here was, yeah, I know what you mean. Mrs. Coombe applied in, and her action was based in contract here. You have an obvious interface with family law, and there are great constraints about what you can and can't ask for in terms of contract when it comes to family law. And if that agreement to pay her £100 per year, look, it's not obviously enforceable really in terms of contract law because she obviously didn't give consideration for it. The other problem was that even if there was some form of consideration, you have the very real issue that in family law, even if there is what would otherwise be seen as a valid agreement, if it has not been put under seal in terms of the court orders, if there's no binding spousal maintenance agreement, then this contractual agreement's basically worth nothing. So things have changed, and now probably the intersection between family law and contract law is even more acute than it was then. And nowadays that just wouldn't, that whole case probably wouldn't even see the light of day, because it wasn't couched in the form of orders that have been sealed by the court. So you might have a valid action in contract, but unfortunately, because it's all family law, the legislation just rides over the top of it. I personally have had to sign a contract under duress, and that was during family proceedings. And I basically had no cause of action because contract law flies out the window and family law will prevail. So it's a bit of twilight in terms of family law. But yes, I see your point. In terms of have things changed, not really. In terms of the way women are viewed, I don't think. Well, there have been some advances with the way women are viewed and with the way women are treated in such circumstances. But the difficulty is the overlay of the family law legislation. So I guess this is a really long advertisement for everyone to do family law. Go and do it, folks. And plus, Lance is an awesome lecturer. So that's Coombe and Coombe. I hope I answered the question.
No, that's good. Thank you.
All right. So the last one was past consideration. So she says to him, hang on a minute, I've done this, I helped you organising this party. That should surely stand me in good stead for helping him feel obligated enough to actually go ahead and collect this furniture. So generally, past consideration will not be considered good, valid, sufficient consideration. In Roscorola, Thomas, and here's something I prepared here. Where are we? Right, here we are. Okay, I love this case. Before I put it up, can someone tell me the facts? Why do I think this case is hilarious?
Do you call it naughty horsey remorse? Is that what you called it in the thing?
See, it helped you remember the case, didn't it? I know, right? It's ridiculous, but it helps you remember. In the middle of the exam, you'll say, haha, after the sale of the horse, the seller came back, asked for the horse, was free from vice. Yes, naughty horsey remorse. Okay. Wanted an assurance that the horse was free of vice. Assurance was given. Horse was obviously vicious. Owner sued on the promise. Yes, promise. And held, failed. Why? No consideration. Okay, the promise was given after the deal was done. Okay, here, Heidi reminds Dale that she helped him organise a party in the past. She thinks this might assist her in obligating Dale to complete the furniture collection. However, if a court were to consider the Roscola case, it seems this consideration would not be good in the eyes of the law because it flowed to the promise in the past. Yep. So, does that seem reasonable? Questions? So, here, conclusion. What are we going to say? I think the question that was here, has Heidi been given any consideration? So it appears that Heidi has not given any legally valid sufficient consideration, and between her and Dale is not enforceable. Is not legally enforceable. What's the legal term of art? Dale's promise to her was a lovely. I love it when students use legal Latin. So, ways that we could make this enforceable. I think this is a bit of a ridiculous question, but anyway. Would she really take him to court for this? No. But anyway, let's just satisfy ourselves. What are some of the ways, what are some of the things that we could consider? Shout it out. Shout it out.
You could offer to pay him to do it for a sum less than what she would have saved, obviously, in the delivery fee, possibly.
Yes. So this would need to be done. When would she need to do it? As part of a bargain between them, so that his conduct was done on the understanding that he would be paid for it. Why is that? Because it transforms it into an exchange. There's a reciprocal exchange between the parties. You're only, and well, or it might not be a sum. It might be something else of value in the eyes of the law. Peppercorn is sufficient. But as long as there is this understanding that it's a bargain rather than, you know, a favour. Yes?
I think Damien came up with a good, I was reading, I think it was Damien's Iraq today, and he came up with the idea of offering to do the babysitting for free, which I thought was another, because it hasn't actually happened yet. So if she changes that agreement to do it for free, I think that's what Damien mentioned, and that made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It was already on the table, so to speak.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's a benefit moving to him, a fresh benefit moving to him. Yes. Yep. The other thing is, and this is slightly ridiculous, why is that?
Because if it's a formal deed, no consideration needs to be exchanged. So
Lovely.
keep things as is.
Exactly.
That would be ridiculous for.
Yes, it would. Yes, it would. The other things I think that make this problem quite ridiculous, these problems are useful because they tease out our understanding, but quite ridiculous in a number of ways. A, because you just would never enforce stuff like this. But there are other things. I mean, is there intention to create legal relations here? You got to say there's a big fat question mark there, don't you, really? Even if she said, oh, look, you know what? If you do that furniture collection for me, I will wash up your dishes for 3 weeks. Yes, that's a value in the eyes of the law, but is that really ever intended to reach a court? I don't think so. I would have real doubts. You know, under homogenous, was everything just vague, up in the air, ever considered to be justiciable? No, not really. So I think these things are necessarily artificial, and the whole Iraq process is artificial, but it helps us get our collective heads around things and around the principles, and that's where I guess we got to kind of bear with it. Looking at the slightly more fun aspect of things, what were your conclusions on problem B? Obviously, you know, we're not going to have a chance to write out an essay, and I wouldn't do this anyway. But let me hear, let's for 5 minutes collectively chew the fat about the whole role of consideration. Hit me with your thoughts, people. I'll be interested to hear. We need to talk about Pinnell's case. So maybe let's start with that. What did Pinnell's case involve? Can someone tell me the facts?
Something about a hawk, a robe, and something else.
That's it. What is the one? The rule in Pinnell's case is sensible because stupid things don't last 400 years. Oh gosh, I love this group. You guys win the award for this term. Absolutely. You guys absolutely win my fave award. So we had Cole owing Pinnell £8.10, and it was due on the 11th of November, and then earlier on the 1st of October, Pinnell agrees to accept £5 2 shillings 2 pence in full satisfaction of the debt. Now, Cole went down, but that was only due to a technical point of pleading. Okay, everyone thinks in this case that you know, Cole actually paying that money early was why he went down, because it was less than what he was supposed to pay. But the court actually said if there wasn't this technical point, Cole would have won. So I guess the way to think about the rule in Pinnell's case is that, yes, part payment of a sum is generally not going to be binding. But you have exceptions, and this is where we get into exceptions and exceptions and exceptions. Payment of a lesser sum earlier than the due date is probably going to be sufficient, because it may well be that the use of the money earlier is sufficient benefit flowing to the promisee than the full amount on the later date. And then you also have that horse, hook, robe issue, okay? So if you pay the lesser sum plus something else of peppercorn kind of value in the eyes of the law, the court's not going to ask, is that sufficient? They're just going to say, oh, okay, you paid a lesser sum, and there must have been some reason for the other party accepting this horse, hook, or robe, and we're not going to ask why that was. We're just going to say, well, okay, they came to an arrangement. And it's sufficient. It doesn't reflect reasonable expectations of people. Yes, Amy Lee, absolutely. There is a nice discussion of Pennell's case, and also of Stilk and Myrick, which I think is useful in Wilmot. So look out for that. There is, so the various different exceptions are discussed in Wilmot, and here, this is where I would probably bring in the accommodations to benefit the creditor, and there you would bring in a discussion of the case that Tammy Lee was talking about a little while ago, which is Williams and Roffey Brothers, which is where the court said, hang on a minute, you know what, here, so Pennell's case is consistent with the rule in Stilk and Myrick, which is about the inability to demand more consideration for performing the same contractual duty, both essentially, I guess, reduce, turn on the point that each new agreement will require fresh, sufficient consideration in the eyes of the law. And however, we have cases like Williams and Roffey Brothers, which basically dance around rules like was laid down in Stilk and Myrick. Because of commercial reality, we have courts have consistently found ways to avoid the rules in Pennell's case and Stilk, Myrick, and in Williams and Roffey Brothers, I'll just put here e.g. via the exceptions, and Stilk and Myrick. So Williams and Roffey Brothers, this is the one where they said, you know, the practical benefit was sufficient extra consideration. That benefit of avoiding the penalties under the main contract was sufficient benefit, as well as not having to engage a new contractor. So anyone got any thoughts on that? What would you be saying to me in an essay like this? I'll put in folks and beer, actually, because I think you probably, if you were doing this in an essay format, you'd probably want to put in folks and beer. In this case, put folks and beer in here. So in Folks and Beer, even then, 1884, So that's less than 80 years after. So no, it's not. It's 280 years. Some time after Pinnell's case. What weighs with me in thinking that Lord Cook in Pinnell's case made a mistake of fact is my conviction that all men of business do every day recognise and act on the ground that prompt payment of part might be more beneficial than enforcing the right to the whole. And Williams and Rothie attempted to get around the Stilken-Myrick principle. So, look, I think consideration, the doctrine of consideration has a role to play. But is that the answer to everything? It's intended to mark off legally binding promises from gifts, obviously. Gifts are great. Gifts are awesome. But gifts will not be enforceable except for very narrow equitable doctrines. So we need something to make contracts justiciable, and consideration is the element that transforms a gift into an exchange. So that's its obvious role. I think where I have problems with it is, as we were just starting to say, modern business practice means that the rules of consideration are regularly, bent. Are they bent out of shape? I don't know. It's up to you to form a view on that. But often you'll even have parties. I mean, I'm a relational contract enthusiast, and you constantly see people, doing things without pinning down any specific agreement on consideration. Often work's just done with tacit understandings. How does the doctrine of consideration, how does it live up to that? In contract B, you'll learn about the doctrine of estoppel, which is where the law will actually, equity will go ahead and enforce a promise even without consideration, if there's sufficient unconscionable conduct there to warrant it doing so. You also have the doctrine of restitution, which is a way of getting payment from somebody even though there's no contract. Again, no contract at all. But you've done work, you should be paid. So restitution might get you there. So these are the things I would be wanting you to think about in an essay of this nature. Okay? Questions? Queries? Because I'm mindful I've got to nip off to contract B now in about 30 seconds. I'll stop sharing. I will put these notes up for you as always. Comments or questions before we go? Cool. Does that make a little bit more sense for you all now? Now that we've kind of done an IRAC and unpacked it? Yes? They're not so scary, really, are they? And if you go ahead, bash one out each week, you'll be able to do them in the exam, no problem. Thanks, folks. I shall see you next week. Bye. Alrighty.